You ever wake up one morning and realize the person next door thinks they own your life, and then watch them try to buy the county? That was me standing barefoot on my deck, coffee in hand, watching a woman in heels sniff around like she was inspecting a bake sale, and then tell me straight-faced, "You have no right to block our pipeline." Grandpa, that line still tastes like perfume and contempt in my mouth. And it was the beginning of a very long, very stupid war. My name's Garrett Murphy. I'm 58, ex-civil engineer, retired, divorced, took half my savings. The other half went to quiet plan, so I moved back to my grandfather's, 47 acres, hoping for peace. Lake Willow looked like the kind of place postcards were jealous of. Mist rising in the morning, loons calling off the far shore, pine reflected so perfectly the mirror almost screamed. My grandfather didn't just leave me land, he left me a responsibility, and it turns out he also left one hell of a legal paper trail. Enter Vivian Blackwood, white Mercedes, clipboard like a scepter. Smile that could sell you a life insurance policy while pickpocketing your wallet. She and her HOA decided the best way to boost property values was a $200,000 community water feature. Willowbrook Falls LED lights fake rocks, the whole Vegas on a budget package. All they needed, she said with that nasal, polite but deadly voice, was a tiny easement across my property to run a pipeline. Tiny, she said. Like I should be grateful she was only taking a little of my family's legacy. I told her no. The smile snapped off for precisely 3 seconds, long enough to prove she'd been auditioning for villain roles. Then the harassment began. Certified letters with glossy threats, anonymous complaints to county code SUVs, slowing past my gate like they were studying the anatomy of my mailbox surveillance photos. Rumors spread at HOA coffee mornings about my hoarding during a drought. They tried to make me the problem. It's a classic move, make the victim look crazy, and half the neighborhood will do your smear work for free. But here's the thing, I used to design water systems for a living. I knew how these things work, and more importantly, I knew where to look. When Sterling and Associates mailed their golden embossed legal scare letter talking eminent domain, I walked right into the county courthouse and started hauling out decades of dust and ink. Deed surveys, water rights files that smelled like history and the satisfaction of being right. Water law in Colorado goes simple and brutal, first in time, first in right. The Murphy family's rights dated back to 1931. Vivian's development was from 2019. Game over. Except the case wasn't just legal, it was personal. She was running a long con, false permit filings, inflated contractor bids, embezzlement from HOA coffers, even attempts to manufacture environmental crises to justify emergency access to my water. She didn't just want my easement, she wanted to monetize everyone's trust and pocket the rest. That's when the small surprises started. A county code officer who inspected my workshop recognized my name, used to work projects with me, and called with an odd tip. Vivian had been filing things listing herself as a certified water rights consultant. She sells pills for a living. She has no credentials, no certificates, just a clipboard and a talent for persuasion. Then a P I called with an offer so disgusting it made my jaw ache, fabricate evidence on me for cash. He refused. He told me Vivian had been offering cash to manufacture dirt on other property owners, and 2 families had already caved under pressure and sold their rights cheap just to stop the harassment. So I did what engineers do. I built a plan. Not impulsive revenge, but a systematic counterattack. I documented every SUV, every anonymous complaint, every fake survey stake, delivered polite ironclad letters to the county sheriff and Vivian herself. I set up trail cams, collected photos, gathered affidavits. I quietly formed an alliance, a ragged, brilliant coalition of people. The HOA had bullied a retired judge, a contractor who smelled fraud, an organic farmer who knew irrigation better than many lawyers, and a wildlife biologist who could explain how heavy construction chokes an ecosystem. Vivian escalated, staging anonymous environmental emergencies, trying to bribe me in a hardware store parking lot with a manila envelope that reeked of desperation and perfume. 50,000 cash, then 75, then guarantees and fake consulting fees. I recorded every offer because people who try to buy you usually leave receipts. And then the twist that made the whole thing lethal, buried in a leather-bound folder in county archives behind ink blots and hand-drawn surveys. We found a 1924 agreement, Murphy Valley Development Agreement, naming my grandfather as perpetual water commissioner for the watershed, a legal role created in exchange for managing flood control and land stewardship. In plain language, it said the Murphy family had authority to regulate, divert, or restrict water for conservation in perpetuity in return for the unpaid public service my grandfather provided. I sat on that discovery like a man holding a loaded invention. The moral high ground had always been there, lodged in the ink of ancestors who knew developers would come. This wasn't just watering rights, it was authority, the legal power to shut off the tap for protection of the watershed. That evening, my deck smelled like pine and possibility. I could have called the sheriff and waved the document like a banner, but winning sometimes means making the other side spend every last penny first. So we let them dig. Let Vivian spend HOA reserves. Let contractors order custom pipe. Let her promise officials a completed community enhancement by Christmas. We built a narrative environmental protection, not personal payback. We lined up environmental groups' legal filings, timed to the construction schedule press briefings, and social media campaigns, explaining watershed conservation, again framed as protecting the valley, not getting even. Technically, I did something elegant and perfectly legal. I installed remote valves, solar-powered, hidden inside the old outflow infrastructure my grandfather had built. With a phone app and a sleep of code, I could drain Lake Willow for approved maintenance, and I would if construction threatened the watershed. The plan was to make the cost of Vivian's theft, incomprehensible canceled contracts, non-refundable materials, penalties, a public spectacle of greed exposed. The best traps are the ones your opponent bails into on their own. November 15th at 6:47 a.m. I hit the button. 40,000 gallons of mountain spring water retreated into the earth like someone had pulled the plug on a bathtub, except this bathtub supported a whole community's flood protection. Construction crews arrived to mud and disappointment. Radios crackled. The water's gone. Vivian called it sabotage, called the sheriff, called the press, called anything that might hide the truth. I walked into a packed HOA meeting carrying a leather briefcase in history. I let Rebecca hand out copies of the 1924 agreement to news crews while I told the room who I was, the legal water commissioner, steward of a century of conservation. The crowd's angry chorus faded into a different noise, the sound of math meeting reality. Contractors realized their liability. HOA members realized their treasurer had been writing checks for projects the board never approved. The county saw falsified permits. Federal environmental officers saw staged contamination attempts. Vivian tried every theater of desperation: smear attacks, bogus lawsuits, bribery claims, private investigators paid to manufacture dirt. But the paper trail, the witnesses, the legal precedent, the whistleblowers, they all told the same story. Within days, she was removed. Audits revealed tens of thousands in unauthorized spending. Criminal charges piled up. Fraud, attempted bribery, conspiracy, falsified government documents. Her husband's insurance contacts evaporated. She sold the Mercedes, resigned from every volunteer post, and left the valley with her name printed across the front page like a cautionary tale. We refilled Lake Willow with a community event that felt frankly holy, kids splashing, old men hugging like it was Independence Day and Thanksgiving all at once, reporters capturing drone shots of water returning to a basin that had almost been turned into a vanity fountain for greed. The county declared the property a critical watershed. Environmental groups set up annual stewardship awards, and our little coalition helped form a rural property rights legal clinic, so other Davids wouldn't have to go it alone. The personal part surprised me as much as I enjoyed seeing justice happen. The real reward was regrowing trust. I stopped being the weird hermit on the hill and started being the neighbor who offers water rights advice over barbecue smoke. The lake's reflection came back clearer than ever, and the morning smelled like pine and coffee instead of diesel and fear. If there's a lesson to this, and there is, but it comes from living through it rather than sermonizing, it's that rights are only paper until someone enforces them, and stewardship beats entitlement every time. Power looks imposing until you find the legal backbone and the allies who care enough to act. Greed relies on speed and secrecy. Conservation relies on patience and documentation. And sometimes the best defense is the one your grandfather wrote down before developers knew how to write better press releases. So tell me, when neighbors get loud and powerful, who do we really answer to, the majority in a vinyl fence cul-de-sac or the law that protects what predates them all? Drop your worst Karen or HOA horror in the comments. I'll read them. And if you've ever had to fight to keep what's yours, tell us how it felt. Share your take. Was I a righteous steward, or did I stoop to revenge? Which matters more, justice that restores community or punishment that satisfies an old hurt? If you've got a story, post it below. If you want advice about water rights, property fights, or how to document harassment without losing your mind, I'll help where I can. And if nothing else, remember, sometimes the quietest guy on the hill is the only person left with both the history and the patience to protect everyone else's tomorrow.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.